It is 6 o'clock, but I suggest we give people a couple more minutes just to trickle in here. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Giron. I'm an urban planner at the City of West Dallas. I'll be monitoring today's public input session on the redesign of McKinley Park. Just want to say thanks to everybody for giving back to the community by being a part of this unique opportunity to redesign the park. We know your time is valuable and that life has been challenging lately, so we really appreciate you showing up and being productive members of your community. We couldn't do this without quality community input, nor would we want to, because ultimately this park is for the neighborhood and we want to build something that will get plenty of use from you and your neighbors. As you can tell, the park is overdue for an upgrade, and we're lucky to have our local developer Cobalt, also architecture firm Rink, and park design firm Parkitecture to bring in their expertise and give McKinley Park a much needed updo. Cobalt is the local developer leading the changes you see along 70th Street and is adding much needed residential homes, office space, and jobs to the area. I'll give them a chance to speak on their development in just a minute. They've hired Blake from Parkitecture to plan and redesign McKinley Park in a way that works for existing neighbors. Today, Blake is going to update us on the status of the park planning, present some design ideas, and then most importantly, seek your input on ways that you can see this park working for you and your families. At next week's on-site meeting, which will be on Tuesday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. in the Fieldhouse, please mark your calendars, Blake will gather more input from an image preference survey and conduct a hands-on exercise with all of us. After that meeting, Blake will share some initial designs with those who share their email address with me. If you'd like to be added to this list of people who will receive park updates, please send me a quick email. My email address will be shared in the slides and in the chat box. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize our elected officials on the call. Mayor Devine, Alderman Weigel, and Alderman Stefanski. They carried out the important job of not just advocating on your behalf, but making sure that as many neighbors as possible were informed about this meeting. Mayor, Alderman, is there anything you'd like to say at this point?
I'm deferring to the mayor if he's got nothing to say. This is Alderman Marty Weigel, obviously one of the two that represent the area. I'm looking forward to hear what the neighbors would like to see here. Looking forward to some positive things coming out of this. I want to thank Tony and our staff, as well as the developer and his partners in this. Looking forward to seeing this be a good park that the city can be proud of for the next 40 or 50 years.
I want to say thank you to the residents as well and everybody involved. This is Alderman Stefanski. Thanks for spending the time with us to give us your input.
Great, thanks. Before turning things over to Blake, I'd like to give Scott Yawk from Cobalt and Matt or Jessica from Rinka the opportunity to make a statement. Is there anything you'd like to share about the project?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Scott Yawk with Cobalt Partners. This is part of the Alice Yards development, of course, spans both sides of the street, and it's several blocks in total length. So this is the west portion, or one of the west portions of the Alice Yards development. So we want to be, thoughtful in the planning and work with the neighborhood. So, we had established some boundaries initially through, the legal documents and the development process. But after the last meeting, and, I'm sure some of the people here participating tonight were at that last Zoom meeting. We've worked hard, and I'll let Matt give a little more detail on that, Matt Rinka from Rink Architecture. But we worked to push the buildings back to that 75-foot mark in response to, some input from the aldermen and that based on some of the constituents there. So I think you'll be pleased to see that we've done that. We've also tried to break up the placement of buildings so that there's, not a kind of a long massing of buildings. So we've improved in that regard as well, which I think will be a nice result. The area is staked out. There are some stakes that show the 75-foot setback. So if anybody wants to walk out there, and certainly we'll be out there next week. But in the meantime, you can see kind of where that lines up. So if there's no questions for me, I'll turn it over to Matt Rinka just for a little more detail on kind of those boundaries.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. This is Matt Rinka, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have just a short update on the master plan. Maybe whoever is controlling the screen can. So based on everyone's kind feedback last time we met, we did increase, as Scott mentioned, that west side park, the linear element of the park on the west side, to 75 feet from curb to building face. We think that actually adds a nice element to that park, and will provide some opportunity for even more engagement for Blake with the neighbors. In addition, we continue to work on sort of the massing of buildings. We recognize the diversity of residential across the street, and the way we're going to break down the multifamily, it wants to be very tasteful and respectful of what's going on there. So that's something that we continue to work on and hope to present soon. You'll start to see here, this is a three-dimensional sort of accent showing in kind of a bird's eye view, the connection of the ball field on the north, as well as the larger park area in the south, connected by that linear park on the west side. We're starting to just allude to some of the massing changes that we're developing for the actual, I'm going to call them sort of townhouse type multifamily that will face the neighborhood on the west side, that linear park element. And we're actually essentially breaking down the size of that building into two buildings. So the idea is to, again, decrease the mass along that west side. And we're actually bringing some of that park into the center of the development. And you can see in that site section, there's kind of a red dashed line. And down at the bottom, there's a site section that shows the green space, the sidewalk, as well as that green space coming into the center of the development. We'll have more on this in future meetings, but just wanted to show a little bit of development on that. And I guess with that, we can hand it over to Blake. Scott, right?
Just one thing before, Matt, too, I would reiterate, we made sure that front element, I know we talked about kind of the townhouse element of 2 stories, then stepping up to 3, but you can see that height in that section view relative to, typical height of, I think we took kind of the average height of the homes across the street. So you'll see that it's not terribly different, and it's set back significantly. So I just want to add that comment. So Blake, we'll turn it over to you next.
Sounds good, guys. My name is Blake Tyson from Parkitecture. I have the pleasure of working with this great design team to see the softscape and the green space area of this project come to fruition. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so this is our first kick at taking input and preference as to how we're going to shape this open space for this development. There's going to be a series of other meetings, as Tony alluded to. Next Tuesday, there'll be an in-person hands-on on site, and that's at 6 p.m. So we'd love to see you there. Bring your ideas, and we'll actually get some ink on the page here. So tonight, I'm going to go over briefly the kind of the schedule of events for our process and the timeline of getting from tonight to something tangible in design and ready for implementation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the past park improvements that West Allis has been chunking away at here over the last 5 years. It's been a significant investment in park improvements, and this is the next step in that process. And then we'll look again at sort of the boundaries and definitions of this new open space and how I'm looking at breaking this down into smaller pieces as we go ahead and plan. And then we'll conclude tonight with a little bit of feedback, and there's 2 ways to do it. We'll have the chat box going here throughout the duration of the meeting. So please, if you have questions or suggestions, feel free to use that feature, and we will be able to get through that running log of comments at the end. And then for those of you who have been on Zoom calls before, hopefully you know how to raise your hand if you have a question. And Tony will be moderating those questions and asking them to the group here so we can all have open dialogue. Okay, so timeline, here we are, the first public information meeting. Next week, again at 6 p.m. We'd love to see you all there. And I'll talk a little bit about the format here in a minute. Throughout the rest of the month of June and into early July, my team will be putting together the raw ideas that we collect from you all tonight and next week. Do some concepts, and we would project those ideas coming back to you for review sometime in late July or early August, which then positions us to have our final concepts done sometime in August. So once the concept is nailed down, the next step is typically moving into final design and engineering drawings ready for construction. And we are speculating that construction of the first phase of building and associated site elements would happen in 21 and into 22. So it's a long road here. This is just the first step in the process of the park plan. And I want you to use me as your voice and your hand throughout this design process. I'm here to take your ideas and put it into a realistic strategy. This is your park, so. A little bit about the process here. Next week, we'll go through some sketch exercises with you in person. It'll be trash paper, real big broad strokes with markers. We'll get our hands dirty, and then we take these ideas and refine them into some more tangible hardline graphics to finalize that concept plan. So that'll be the evolution. And for those of you who have not been out and about in the community over the last few years, I just wanted to highlight some of these other park improvements. And Tony, did you want to go through the list here? But these are some of the images from recent park projects.
Yeah, so just to pat ourselves on the back, the city has in recent years done an excellent job of upgrading several parks, including Roosevelt Park, Clentz, Veterans, the skate park, and Liberty Heights Park.
Yeah, so these images show some of the playground improvements, but there's also been new basketball courts, tennis courts, the main skate park, and then Liberty Heights also had a skate spot installed. So a nice variety of features. This park is going to be a little bit different. It is more of a neighborhood scale, so there's going to be a variety of things coming into the park. So that's hopefully what we'll be gathering from you here in the next hour or so. So I assume most of you are familiar with this site. but here are some of the images. We have the ball diamonds, we have the playground, the field house, and the hardscape play area here. We've got the tennis courts and then some flexible open green space. So what I need to do here tonight is understand from you how you are using these spaces and which ones of these uses are sacred moving forward. Or maybe we can start fresh and look at a whole different palette of amenities for this park. So as we start to look at the spaces, I'm breaking this down into 3 distinct rooms, okay? The northern area, I'm calling the rec room. That's where we're gonna have most of our active programming space. It's the largest of the 3 areas. It gives us the most flexibility in how we develop. So if we're gonna have any structures or active rec, it's likely gonna be in this recreation room zone. Okay, this red area, as Scott mentioned, it's 75 feet wide, and that is a very critical area of this park. It has to serve not only as a conduit for park users to move between the north and the south, but it has to act as a front yard, not only to the residents on the west side of the street, but as a front yard to the new development space. So it's going to be a design challenge to treat this as somewhat of a hallway or conduit, as well as a programmable open space. The orange box on the south, I'm terming the family room. This is another larger space which can be used for community gatherings, small informal events. So I think it has some nice flexibility. And you'll see underneath these 3 colored boxes, there are some park pattern diagrams, and that was an early attempt at blocking out some of the space just for spatial allocation. So please don't take those to be final design ideas. We are coming to you to gather those ideas here tonight. So just for what it's worth, I wanted to help people understand what 75 feet wide really is. And the distance from home plate to first base on a softball diamond is 75 feet. Or you can also imagine that as 7 to 8 parking stalls wide. Okay. The other way to think about it is from the back of the sidewalk to the back of the sidewalk is about 70 feet wide. And now that we have the stakes in there, you'll be able to walk out and actually get a feel in the real site for how big that space really is. Normally 75 feet would be plenty of space to do what we need to do, but we also have some grade challenges to overcome as we think through this problem. So keep in mind, it's not a flat pancake of a site. So we will have to make some accommodations for the slope change. So with that, I want to stop talking at you and I want to start the feedback process here. As you provide us your feedback in the chat feature, please help identify which room you're leaving comments for so that we can start to build our menu or program statement for each of these areas as we dive into concept phase. So as you think through these spaces, I want you to think beyond just how you might use it. Think about your children or your parents or your grandparents potentially. We need to make sure that this open space is designed for all generations. And as we've all seen over the last few months, how the public uses park space is changing on a daily basis, especially with all the health concerns. So we are sort of on the cutting edge here of the new trends in park development. So please give us some comments here in the chat box. And if you want to raise your hand to ask specific questions, Tony will facilitate that.
All right, so we can go ahead and answer any of these questions. Which sorts of park elements would you like to see in any of the 3 rooms? And what are some great parks that that inspire you?
Someone's got to leave us the first chat comment. Okay, someone's asking for an updated playground area, certainly. I think it's safe to say that the majority of the existing facilities within the park are on the cutting block. So I think we'll be starting with a fresh palette here. Another request for children's play area, good. I might ask you or challenge you to elaborate on that. Are there other park facilities in the area that you have visited with your children or your families that spark interest? Are there certain play elements that you favor over others? Okay, basketball court request. Yeah, so someone mentions biking here. We have a great proximity to the Hank Aaron Trail. So are we, should we be thinking about some sort of amenities potentially for trail riders? Would be a good one. Okay, I see a question here about why did the exercise area get taken out? I don't know if you're alluding to the patterns you saw on the graphics on the slides, but those are not the proposed park plans.
Blake, I believe there was an exercise area at McKinley Park previously
Okay.
that the school district, it was the school district's equipment, I believe, and they simply moved it to another location where they're reorienting a different park.
Thank you, Sean. So there's a question about the rec department use of the baseball field. I thought I saw Shelley on. Shelley, do you want to speak to the programming of that?
Hi, Blake. So I unmuted myself because it'd be easier to talk than chat there. I guess it depends our future usage of that, the availability of it. Yeah, the loss of the two diamonds there is huge, and may result in us redeveloping school district property for diamonds for our rec league usage. So I guess some of it depends on what happens with the McKinley Park property. And then other things, availability of parking, restrooms, storage, all those types of things that go with it.
Okay, so when are these fields being programmed? In a typical year, I should say.
So, I mean, primarily summertime. That's when our rec department leagues are. So beginning mid-June to beginning mid-August.
Okay. What other, since I've got you on the spot here, Shelley, what other facilities within the park are you typically programming?
Well, we don't program at all there anymore. But we had programmed in the building, but we relocated all the programs that we held there to other places throughout the school district.
Okay. All right, we have some more comments here about connections to the trail. Request for a pavilion and restrooms. Interactive spaces for multi-generational use. Okay, another comment about the workout stations. Okay, a comment about butterfly habitat or native plantings. Does anyone have any favorite parks in the area that you want to reference?
I think I see 2 or 3 different comments about Veterans Park and their exercise area.
Mhm. One of the things we'll be doing at our next meeting is going through a collection of imagery once we can assemble this menu of programmatic options. And I think we'll be able to help define the character of this space as we wade through some of these images next week. Okay, another reference to Vets Park. Okay. Liberty Heights, Lakeshore State Park, a little different scale, but nice facility. Yeah. So as we looked at those 3 colored boxes, did the patterning seem to make sense from a programmatic standpoint on the north end versus a more passive family use on the south? Anyone have any comments about how that's framed? Okay, I've got some comments about trails. That's good. If anyone wants to ask a question verbally, go ahead and raise your hand and we can field your question that way. Okay, some more requests here coming in for the new playground area with restrooms. Okay, we have a question about basketball court use. Yeah, this is a question we've seen in the past on other park projects, and there are some strategies that we're looking at on a routine basis to try and keep basketball court use favorable for neighborhood settings. Okay, Jessica's asking me how to raise their hand. Tony, that is in participants. Guys, if you click on your participants button, you should get a pop-up screen on the right-hand side, and there should be an option to raise your hand.
It's usually on the bottom right.
If we're having trouble finding that, you can unmute yourself here and we'll try and manage it that way if you have a question to ask. Okay, someone's suggesting a beer garden here. I like it. All right, G's iPad, you're up.
Not that it's an absolute necessity, but would there be security cameras on site to deter any negative behaviors at any time?
Good question. I may defer to someone at the city or with Cobalt on that question.
Thanks, Blake. We have done that at some other parks, and we'll certainly add it to the list of consideration as we have at other parks that we've recently done.
Because lived here for over 50 some years. I love having the park there. I'm just concerned that it could turn, some stuff can happen, you know. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Marty, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, you talked about the grade challenge on that, is it the front room, the 75-foot corridor? Is that what we call it, the front room? And then
Oh, the living room area?
the living room area. And I'm just wondering what the possibilities would be, and I brought it up before, of removing that grade for that 75-foot corridor and then putting like a retaining wall with obviously some landscaping in front of it so it doesn't look like just a big blank wall. Something like what we have at Liberty Heights, the north boundary of Liberty Heights, excuse me, not Liberty Heights, Veterans Park. If you go over to Veterans Park, there's an apartment building immediately north of it, and there's a decorative stone wall that it makes that, I think it would make that living room a lot more usable without having that big grade change there. And then my other question is, as Matt and his team looked at how residents of the new apartment buildings to the east might access the park, is there going to be one point of access in the middle, or would it be on either end? I guess those are just questions I have on the general, how the development fits with the neighborhood there, and how that would affect programming on that front room space.
Yeah, good question, Marty. Thank you. Matt, do you want to take the access question?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the reason I call the multifamily townhouse style is we're looking at each unit on the ground level having its own access to a front porch that accesses the park. So it truly will serve and act like townhouses. And so I think I saw another question regarding something similar to that, but it was more about access for vehicles. So right now we're not planning any curb cuts or vehicular traffic to go into the neighborhood. It would all be accessed off of the east side of the block. So no traffic into the neighborhood for the residential development component.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Good, thank you. All right, we've got a request for a pool here. All right, anyone else want to raise your hand and ask a question that format? Okay, we've got a comment about dogs. That's going to be in a policy discussion. It's a different meeting, I think, but thank you for the question. Okay, splash pad. Are you the same person who asked the pool question? No. Okay, there's 2 requests for a water feature. Ice rink, okay. So the challenge will be, as you can see, we're getting a lot of variety of requests here, and to make sense of all this and get it all to fit is often the fun part and the design challenge of any of these processes. That's why we need you in attendance next week to help us put those patterns down. Lindsay, can you elaborate on your comment about keeping it as one of the designated rec areas? You can unmute yourself if you want to talk through that. Okay, I've got a request for a dog exercise area. Shelley, can I put you on the spot again here? Are you doing any summer service in the park this year?
Not this year, in part, that's partially because of the COVID. A lot of our summer rec programming has been adjusted, postponed, reworked. But prior even to this summer, since the sale of the property, we have not done any on-site rec programming there.
Okay.
Not to say that we wouldn't, and that would be a great spot because if you look at that area for kids, for them to get to any of our other rec program areas, they're either crossing 76th, crossing Greenfield Avenue, crossing 70th. So some challenges for kids to get to any other rec area on their own. We would be open to it if the opportunity and facilities presented itself.
Okay. Yeah, you make a very good point about this being really the only larger green space in the area for programmed rec. A little bit of a desert in terms of open space in this area of the city. Okay, we've got a request here for a year-round building on the north end. Okay, some sort of community building space. Good.
Blake, it's Shelley again. Maybe a good point of reference for that. I believe it's Frame Park out in Waukesha. Is that the one along the kind of river there?
Yes.
They
Yes.
have a really nice like community space building with just an open area and then a small like kitchenette, all like one level.
Okay, good. That's a very good reference.
That sounds really nice.
All right, there's a question about the format here for next week. Tony, or Sean, I may defer that to you. Do you envision this to be inside or outside in the park?
I think we'd planned on doing that inside in the field house, but I mean, I think we can be flexible at the same time. If the weather's nice, we could do it outside.
Yeah. Okay, a question here about amenities east of 70th. And Scott, if you're still on, I may defer that to you as part of the larger development pattern.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the question.
Okay.
Is it in
What
the,
amenities will be east of 70th? Can we provide a safe link for kids and all folks to cross 70th Street back and forth on foot?
Yeah, I mean, the main components on that side of the street will be the office and then hotel. You know, it'll create a more walkable connection over to the retail that exists there today for sure. And then there's a plaza area. That plaza will, you know, in many ways serve the office users, but that doesn't mean there won't be first floor uses that are you know, not directly supporting the office uses. So those will be available. You know, in terms of what type of crossing, I think I defer to the city on that, but certainly those are considerations that can be addressed.
Yeah. All right, so there's a question here about consideration of the potential issues between the residents of the new development and other park users. And that's what I was getting at earlier is we have to find that delicate balance of how that space functions as not only a front yard for the development, but also public open space and allowing people to move through it and feel like they're not infringing on those residents' personal space. I think careful selection of how we choose our site furnishings and the lighting and our sidewalk and path connections are really, really important. And how we look at framing out some of the softscape with plantings and screen walls, that type of thing is really going to be critical to respect both uses of that space. Great question. Okay, there's a question here about Washington from 70th to 76th and how traffic patterns move quickly through there. So yeah, that may be a question for Public Works or planning to think about some traffic calming. I apologize, I don't know that issue. Sean or Tony, do you want to address that?
I can't specifically speak to it. I do see Pete Daniels on here, who's our city engineer. So I don't know if it's an issue that's come up in the past, or perhaps they could also contact Pete on this.
There's already a stop sign at 72nd Street, I believe. It's a four-way stop. So certainly for crossing the park to the park, there would be a four-way stop already. I guess the rest of the way down, there's no stop signs. I can't recall off the top of my head, but we've had a few people over the years complain about people cutting through there, and then Madison as well. We'd have to look at some traffic calming further to the west, I guess, but certainly at the park, it's a four-way stop, and maybe we could do some bump outs there as part of the development. I guess I didn't think about.
Pete, I wonder if the intersection of Walker and 72nd, might be a node to look at. I think that's going to be a big funneling into the park. So that might be a spot we want to address.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great question. All right, I think we might be dropping some people here in the next little bit. I certainly don't want to keep anyone past your attention span, but I think this is a really good start to the feedback process. And for those of you who do need to jump off, we look forward to hopefully seeing you next week on Tuesday at 6 and moving forward. So let me go back and share my screen again here. As I had mentioned, if you want to stay part of the process, Tony's email is here. And as we move through design development and have these concepts a little bit more solidified, we'd like to get the information back out to you just to keep you in the loop and get the feedback on some design preference. So please make a note of his email and let him know that you want to be a continued part of this process, and we'll certainly keep you in the loop.
Blake, I do see Alderman Weigel's raised his hand.
Blake, if I could just mention something before we start wrapping up. I think most of you are aware that there is a neighborhood association that focuses on this group, primarily 70th on the east, Greenfield on the south, and 77th Street on the west, and the northern city limit, also known as like the Hank Aaron Trail on the north. And like all neighborhood groups are always looking for input and help from the neighbors, people to step up, help, manage the group, keep the Facebook active, and show up at meetings. I'm going to guess that most of the citizens that are here today live in that area. And there is, of course, a Facebook page for it, Fairview Park Neighborhood Association. If you take a look, make sure you get the West Dallas one if you're looking to join or get more active, because there are several Fairview parks around the country. Make sure you get the West Dallas one. Always looking for more help and input from the neighbors. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Does anyone else from either the design or development team or the city have any other comments here for anyone?
Just to like to thank everybody, and it's a good meeting, get it kicked off, and we're excited about working with the neighborhood on creating a nice amenity.
Good. Yeah, hopefully this is a nice way to start the process. It's a little bit atypical from how I'm used to doing public input, but I think we're in this new era and we're all adapting. So I appreciate everyone's flexibility. And hopefully we have a productive meeting next week on site. Love to see you all there. Bring your mask, right? So with that, Tony, I'm going to hand it back to you just for any closeout comments.
Thanks, Blake. I think you did a great job today, and thank you everybody for coming in and showing your support for the park, and also for giving all of your great input. It's all copied down and we're gonna be reviewing it offline. And yeah, thanks. Marty, did you have something else to say? Okay, I saw a raised hand. Maybe.
No, that's not a raised hand. That's an applaud. That's the
okay.
applaud reaction.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, and see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.